All right, thanks for coming in again, Corey. I know it's the middle of basketball season and you're probably not sleeping very much, but I appreciate you coming in. Our goal today, if you think back, we've had a pre-observation talk, and then we talked after I observed you about some things, and you came up with some ideas. And we're focusing on scouting and that sophomore team, and maybe ways to help them find their own niche in the system. So we'll continue that today a little bit, and we're going to move to the next step, which is developing what we call a SMART goal. And I'll kind of walk you through the process of what a SMART goal is. Basically, it's just a plan for how we're going to work on developing the scout team. So let's go ahead and just get started off with a question. As you look at the sophomore scout team, what are areas you can identify as goals you have for that team as we look throughout the year? So in the end, let's say when it's that time to play your one-off game, what are the goals you have for that scout team to be able to do?
Well, I think the biggest goal is for them to be able to effectively run what our opponent is going to be running to give us a legitimate look at what our guys will see when they're on the floor in the game.
What areas, specifically, offense would be one. What other areas would there be that you would want them to perform?
Offense, baseline out of bounds, sideline out of bounds. If they do something, the way that they defend, we can look at, how they defend the post, and, do they help with guards, or do they come double, all those type of things.
Sure. That's good stuff. And then along with that, as you learn the offense and defenses, you also do player personnel type of stuff. So I would assume that's
right. Yep.
in the mix too. Okay. And I think your guys they did a pretty good job, at least in the Storm Lake Scout, of after they had a few minutes of figuring out what it is that they want to do. And I don't know what you've done since then, if you've seen an improvement. I know this last week you had a game Friday, and then a game the next night. Was it Friday, Saturday?
Friday, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, so you didn't have a lot of time for scouting, but and that's certainly a factor as you move forward. What are some other tools? I know we talked about some before that as we're looking at when they get to that point and what they're doing, which is what we talked about. What are some tools that you're going to use to get them to that point?
Well, I like the idea of the of the jerseys to be able to, identify specific players. Not only with our terminology about how we're going to kind of defend them, but if a team has a player that is primary focus, being able just to put a different jersey on it to be able to identify. That way we know, okay, we got to help on this guy all the time, or whatever the case may be.
Good. We also, we went over a couple of things that included using technology and then also using your staff a little better. Can we go into those again real quick just to get a review on them?
Yeah. Our Huddle software that we use for scouting and video sharing and all that kind of stuff. Getting ready for even tonight's game. Last night we spent about 15 minutes just breaking down specific clips. So
are you at the point now that you're breaking them down? Or are you still doing the full? I never got to the.
Well, we're still in the full clips, but Coach Doley went through and identified their sets, and we just watched that clip then.
Because he's pulling them out, and that's good.
Right. Yeah.
Could you write on the screen too? I don't know. Are you guys doing that or?
Yeah. I mean, we had it hooked up to the smart board.
Oh, really?
And I was able to draw on the smart board then. Is okay. This guy needs to be here, and this is how we're going to cover this, and our rotations and those type of things.
And can you? And then you can stop it, can't you? So
yeah.
You can go, and then that's when you can draw, and that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I never got to that point, but I always wanted to. We didn't have smart boards, which kind of hurt us, but
right.
That's a real cool tool.
Yeah.
I think the Huddle's a great option.
Yeah.
For us, and then you said you're using John a little bit more too, and that's good. He's stepping up, I would assume. And
right.
How's he handle more when you give him more responsibility?
Good. I mean, we had him do, for our second of a back-to-back game, we had him do the scouting report, and, he had that done 3 days in advance, I think, so I could look over it, and if we needed to make changes, then we could, and then that carries over on the bench. Now he's identifying our opponent's sets and things like that, so.
It's always hard though to hand that over, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And not watch it. At least for me it was to trust someone else that much and say, I got you, you're right, they're running 4 out 1 in, or
Yeah.
whatever. Okay, we've kind of gone over some of the results that you would see. I do think you're doing a lot of really good things as you build up to the scout, with the drills that lead into the things you're doing. Even walking by practice a few times last week, I see you're still focusing on the fundamental things. You're not just spending your whole time worrying about getting ready for the other team, and I appreciate that. That's a good philosophy to keep. So let's talk about the sophomore team, and I know you've mentioned some challenges, and I've watched closer since you brought that up. What are some challenges that you see as you move towards the end of the year with getting the sophomore team to be able to do the scout the way that you want, to be able to run the offenses and defenses and understand player personnel, and what are some challenges you would foresee with that group, knowing the way you do?
Well, I think with this particular group, and I talked with Coach Horkey, who had him last year as freshman. He kind of experienced the same challenges. It's a group that really kind of struggles picking up sets. They really struggle, at this point, even 2 months into the season now, with our own set plays, and while they can handle out of bounds plays and all that kind of stuff pretty well, being able to call a set out, an offensive set during the game, and have them executed, that's kind of.
What do you think it is? Is it a spatial thing with them, or is it do you think they just don't get it? Are they moving around positions too much? I mean, what?
No, I don't think it's that they're moving around positions too much, and part of it probably is that generally speaking, we don't run a ton of sets. I mean, It's not like we call sets every time down the floor.
So your own offensive scheme is based around kind of making on live reads and just making a play, as opposed to a set. And when you have someone else that's set to run.
Right.
They don't. It's a concept they don't even grasp. They don't. To them, it's not something that exists.
Right. Yeah.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
That's a big one for them. But it would help as they got older, I think. Especially because you're going to see the same things, I would assume. Storm Lake's going to do the same thing in 2 years that we're running now.
Yeah.
And so exposing to that is good. Anything else you can think of with them? I mean, how about their work ethic? I mean, are they?
It's a roller coaster a little bit. They'll have, and we see that in games too. We'll have stretches where we really get after it and really play well, and then we let off the gas and relax a little bit and let teams back in, or if we make a run to close a gap, we'll let them stretch that back out. So that's a big thing, is that for us to get them to understand that if they're doing an opponent scout, that when we go full speed, that they need to be practicing just as hard as if it's a regular drill that we do every day.
And then it becomes, like you just said, mental. Now they're trying to think, whereas your system isn't a thinking system. It's more of a read and react.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that. Well, good. So what are a couple things that you think you can do? They do struggle with sets, and what are some things you can do to help them understand that? And I know we talked about a few of them last time. What are some ideas you have to get them to the point that it's not going to be the same as it is in another system, where you're going to specifically guard a specific set based on specific things, because that's not what you guys do. But to get them to the point that they can run it in practice and at least show the varsity team a good look? And what are some ways that you can get them to that point?
Well, again, I think repetition is important. Giving them, maybe a couple days, 2-3 days in advance to start, working on things, and if that means that we keep them, after for 5 or 10 minutes, leading up to the day we're going to put the scout in to, walk through them where it's just those guys on the floor, and then again trying to find some ways that we can, break it off and, take 2 pieces and, this is your movement, and post players, this is what you're doing in this set. Guards, this is what you're doing in this set, and then try to put it together and then have them, be able to run it just by knowing, exactly what those little segments are that they've worked on.
Good. Good. Well, so we've kind of gone over everything. I think we've got everything covered in order for us to move forward and kind of build the SMART goal. So let me explain to you what the SMART goal is and how it works. SMART's an acronym for, just like always in teaching, there's an acronym for something. Well, it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. And have you done any SMART goals before? So we'll start with the specific, and we've kind of already answered this. What will students be able to do? So specifically, what is it that we want them to do? Now, what we said was, or what you brought up was effectively run what we will see, offenses, defenses. That's a great goal. The only thing we have to change is effectively. Because effectively, when we get to the next part, which is measurable, doesn't allow us to measure. So I think that running what we will see, in a scout versus offense and defense and OB plays, how many do you want them to be able to do per game? So when you play a team, let's come up with a number for how many you want them to be able to do.
Okay. In some of the recent opponents since since you came in, we kind of look at, and I think even with the opponent that you took a look at, a lot of times teams will have a couple plays that what they go to.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can have them be able to identify 2 offensive sets and maybe 2 sent out of bounds plays that they primarily run. If you figure if they run those 2 plays, a couple times each quarter, that's 8 possessions now where we feel that we've gained an advantage. So
Sure, possibly 16 points.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll be able to identify 2 offensive and defensive sets, offensive sets and based on out of bounds plays, and be able to execute them full speed in practice. So that's kind of what we've gone for. Okay, so how will we measure that? How are you gonna? Pretty simple, but how would you measure that as you go forward?
Well, just we'll be able to, observe them as they are going through things, and we'll be able to identify if they're running those sets correctly.
Right. As we go into the achievable section, I have written down what will you do to cause the improvements. And we've gone over several things as we've gone through it. Specifically, I heard repetition, extra days doing the scout, breaking things down, 2 pieces, offensive, defensive. You also talked about huddle, using film, and then using John a little bit too. So those are some things that you're going to do to make sure that it's an achievable goal. Is this relevant? Goes into the next phase. So how can this be relevant to your team having success? And as we look at relevant, we kind of want to look at bigger picture. So relevant to your team. Sure, if they run a good scout, it helps you have a better chance of winning. But these kids in general, as you look at them as students, not only in basketball but in school, how would this be relevant for them crossing over to life, basically? Any ideas on that?
Well, I think focus and attention to detail. Not just doing something almost right, but trying to achieve perfection on that, I think is something that, you know, they can use in a job, marriage, you know, a lot of different ways outside of, you know.
Do you have a perfect marriage? Sorry, I got it right.
No.
Okay, just want to make sure. Go ahead. No, that's good though. Attention to detail, achieving perfection.
Yeah.
And then they're also, if you look at it, it's a team thing.
Right.
So as you, I think if you cross over to some of our district goals, and I've looked them up, I know you haven't probably paid attention to the athletic goals we have for the district, but one is learning to work cooperatively together, and that's actually number one, and I see a direct relevancy there with that, so just because I know that would have taken you a while to get to that, the answers, you haven't seen it. Then we have to do time bound, so that's the last piece of this is what time constraints are we dealing with? And it's, don't make it too hard, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, basically we're looking at, you know, playing twice a week for the next, you know, 4 or 5 weeks, so, you know, these kids will be spending a couple of days, you know, leading up to, I think, each of our games, getting ready to be able to implement this stuff.
And then, from our perspective, we'll be looking to identify 2 offensive sets for the scout team, baseline out of bounds plays as well. Be able to, you guys are going to observe and see and identify if they're doing the things, and you can specifically see that based on whether or not they're running the proper sets. Use repetition, extra days. Relevancy-wise, you're going to have them pay attention to detail, looking to achieve perfection, and then as you bring it all together, the ultimate goal, time-bound wise, is not necessarily to have them be able to do it for this game on Friday. It's to be able to do it ultimately when.
Well, I mean, ultimately, is obviously when we get in the tournaments. And
So the end of the season.
end of the year, yeah.
I think they'll do it. You think they'll get it?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll find.
What about leaders? That's one thing I've noticed on that sophomore team is who's the guy that's grabbing the bull by the horns in the group?
I
There's
haven't
a one.
identified one at this point.
Yeah.
No.
Is there any freshmen that will be able to do that with that group?
Yeah.
Maybe yes. How many sophomores will you lose because of that? Will you lose some? 'Cause you got quite a few sophomores.
Yeah, we got a ton of them. We've got 8 juniors and seniors. No, 11. We got 14 sophomores.
14 sophomores.
Yeah.
You can start mixing them up. It says nothing to do with the video.
What do you
but I
mean?
just thought, well, the freshmen gonna start, because you got some,
Well,
arguably, some freshmen that could,
yeah, I think
contribute.
that we've got 3 freshmen that would play a lot at the JV level right now, at least 3.
yeah.
I told Horky we'd leave them together until he got done.
Is there some time after he's done, where you have a
We
few
played 2
games left?
games. Yeah, he finished on the 4th, and then play Harris Lake Park on the 7th.
Okay.
CCE's on the 12th.
So I should get ready for parent calls on the 7th, probably.
Maybe.
That's good to know. Well, I appreciate you taking time. I know you're super busy, and I'll write up this goal for you and get it to you. But it's helped me learn how to kind of do this and try to question a little bit better, and I appreciate it. So
Okay.
thanks a lot.
You bet.